Bilbao será la primera ciudad del mundo que esté cubierta completamente con Smart Grids, con todo lo que esto supone de avance hacia el futuro en la prestación de las capacidades energéticas y de la eficiencia energética para una ciudad. Y ya hay empresas de fuera de Euskadi que se nos están acercando interesadas por participar en este proyecto. Y en tercer lugar, el gas natural no convencional. Estamos explorando varios pozos en Álava que garantizan nuestra autosuficiencia energética para los próximos 30 años mediante la tecnología del fracking. Y no quiero dejar pasar la oportunidad de mencionar una particular característica de nuestra economía y que es motivo de reflexión también en estas jornadas, como es la política de clústeres, una estrategia sustentada en principios de colaboración y de excelencia en la que en el País Vasco venimos trabajando desde hace 2 décadas. En la actualidad contamos con una economía clusterizada en aquellos sectores en los que somos tecnológicamente punteros. En concreto, disponemos de 11 asociaciones que trabajan como clústeres en sectores como el de la energía, máquina herramienta, automoción, tecnologías de la información, por citar algunos de ellos. Y estamos yendo más allá. Hemos puesto en marcha el programa Pre-Clusters para extender esta política a otros sectores. Ya contamos con 9 nuevos sectores, entre ellos el de equipamiento, alimentación, biociencias, que junto con los ya constituidos representan el 60% de la industria vasca, y junto a ello estamos también impulsando un programa de interclusters para que las empresas de diferentes y de distintos clústeres fortalezcan la cooperación y encuentren juntas nuevas oportunidades de negocio. He de decir que este modelo vasco goza de un amplio reconocimiento internacional. Hace escasas semanas la Universidad de Harvard, con el prestigioso profesor Michael Porter, que es el padre de la política de clústeres, a la cabeza, nos situó como modelo de desarrollo económico de referencia en cuanto a esta política. No quiero alargarme más. Este es a grandes rasgos el modelo que estamos aplicando en el País Vasco para hacer frente a una crisis y mejorar nuestra competitividad. Es un modelo que basa buena parte de su éxito, como habrán visto, en la suma de esfuerzos: gobierno, empresas, centros tecnológicos, universidades. Somos un único equipo que se presenta de forma unida ante los retos de la globalidad. El próximo mes de octubre celebraremos el Congreso Internacional de Competitividad con la participación de los principales expertos mundiales de clústeres e innovación, lo que nos convertirá durante unos días en referencia internacional de innovación y competitividad. Espero que se animen a visitarnos y que puedan comprobar in situ algunos de los muchos atractivos que hoy he intentado exponerles en materia económica y empresarial, pero tenemos muchísimos más. Nosotros decimos que Euskadi se puede saborear con los 5 sentidos. Tenemos una de las mejores gastronomías, uno de los mejores paisajes, unas grandes tradiciones, grandes acontecimientos culturales, y sobre todo tenemos lo mejor, que es muy buena gente dispuesta siempre a abrazar al que nos visita, así que les esperamos en Euskadi. Thank you very much. Eskerrik asko.
Thank you very much, any compelling remarks from gentlemen in the audience? Ambassador, would you like to say something impromptu? Okay. So I turn now to my friend and colleague, Mr. Dr. Amit Kapoor, to come forward and present what the Institute of Competitiveness is doing in India, and also on the specific arena where the Basque businessman would be interested in his area of work, and therefore the collaborative opportunity which has already been announced, so to speak.
Thank you, Rohit. Good evening, all of you. A great welcome to His Excellency here at this forum. It's absolutely a delight to have you all here. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation to be here and coming to India and seeing this place. So what I'm really going to talk about is what India is really about. For the benefit of people who are coming in from Spain, I would try to give a very different perspective as to what India actually brings on the table. If you really look at what has happened in India in the last 10 years or 20 years, it's something which is absolutely amazing. India has grown exceptionally well, but now there are some numbers that we need to actually see as to how India is actually moving ahead. In 1991, India was contributing close to about 1% of the world GDP. But today, India contributes close to about 3% of the world GDP. But now we have to look at this information in light of what China is doing. China was again 1% in 1991, but today it is 9%. So there is a very different trajectory that has actually happened within these two set of countries. But I think there's also a huge level of shift that has actually happened across the world. If you really look at US contributes close to about 25% of the world GDP. Europe does that. But there is a whole huge reconfiguration that has actually happened. And this reconfiguration of the world economy has actually compelled companies or firms to really look at pastures outside. And this is where I think India becomes a very important destination. If you really want to understand India, I think there are two perfect issues or ideas that need to be looked at. The first of the things is what I call as the factor conditions, the land, labor, and capital. I would really focus on something on labor here. I think when everybody talks about India, we have to talk about the big population that we actually have, or the demographic dividend that we can actually look at. But now this has to be looked at from a very deep perspective. Because when we talk about the demographic dividend, there are corollaries to the story. Simply saying that India has 1.2 billion people does not mean that we have 1.2 billion people in the workforce. The number of people in the workforce are close to about, say, 450 million people. But are all of them educated? Or what is the situation that actually happens here? So we need to start looking at perspectives which are far different. Simply saying that India is actually going to have huge sets of labor, talented labor, no, that's not going to be correct. You have to really see as to what is happening within your sector. India does produce close to about 1.1 million engineers, but is it that we are producing engineers in a certain field? Are they trained enough to actually work in sectors that we are actually talking about or not? The next thing, if we really talk about labor itself, or the demographic mushroom or the age mushroom, we have to understand from one single, or we have to look at the basic idea that India is also going to be one of the oldest countries in the world. And when I say India is going to be one of the oldest countries in the world, it means that India is going to provide one of the finest opportunities in healthcare. In fact, like a lot of people just look at, say, numbers, but we have to say that India in the next 20 years is going to be one big opportunity for healthcare, insurance, and for one single reason, that the aging population is actually going to happen. So aging is not a concept which is just happening in the rest of the world. It's happening here, and we are actually seeing it in a very unique way. There are challenges that are going to get posed because of this. But of course, like the challenge is going to be in terms of, say, when I talk about the cities here, you have seen something like Delhi already. You have experienced Delhi. But there is something very unique that we need to understand about Delhi, that it actually has a huge mess in terms of what we call as a traffic jam. But this also gives us some very unique information. If I really look at the kind of situation that we are going to face on healthcare, India is expected to lose close to about 17 million man-years because of premature cardiac deaths. But is that a very alarming figure? Is it a negative statement that I'm giving, or is it an opportunity? It certainly is an opportunity the way I look at it. Because out of these 17 million man-years that are going to get lost, about 50% of them are going to get lost because of traffic jams. So what does that mean? Because when the Linda Carey said that you are actually going to talk about electrical vehicles, you are going to talk about integrated urban transportation, you are going to talk about solutions which are going to be very unique and probably very much acceptable in a country like India. So that is where we have to actually see. If you, when we said about these traffic jams, we said the model could be that you could actually have roadside kiosks or healthcare centers, which could actually be enabled by some technology companies which are coming from the Basque region or the Basque country. Of course, like moving beyond these numbers, there's something in terms of the demographic dividend in terms of what is the level of opportunity that actually exists. Yes, we have a huge middle class. We have close to about 300 million people who are categorized within the middle class. But now the question is going to be, what about those bottom 900 million people or rest of the 900 million people? You could actually say that India is actually one big place which has far more number of poor than sub-Saharan Africa. But now the question is, there is a picture that we have to look at. And the picture is, one picture could be shown which say that, okay, there is a lot of poverty in India. But I think in poverty lies the opportunity here. Or in that 900 million people lies the opportunity. And the opportunity is that, okay, you can actually sell products which are what we call a sachet-driven market. India is a very disaggregated market. India is not a market where you could actually sell in bulk. There are going to be models which are going to be unique for India. You could actually, or you will have to sell, which is going to be in small numbers. It's something like very simple. If you talk about cigarettes, cigarettes are going to be sold in, say, size of one. You could actually pick up a cigarette from a roadside kiosk and you could actually buy it. That's a similar thing that's going to happen on soaps, perfumes, or whatever, across the board. The second thing that we need to understand about India and the population is that India is a hugely price-sensitive market. India is not a country that you would say that you can come in and be successful in year one. It's a complex reality. It's a complex thing. India changes every 100 kilometers. Incidentally, if you really talk about from a competitiveness viewpoint, if I say that India is one country, which is, we have to look at it as one single unit, no, we would actually be absolutely wrong. We would actually get our strategy horribly wrong. What we need to see here is that India is an aggregation of 28 different realities. And each of these 28 realities pose a different challenge or provide a different opportunity for you. When you actually talk about these 28 different realities, or what I call as 28 different states, we need to understand as to how these states are actually growing. Just a case in point, if you really talk about states in India, a state like Maharashtra contributes close to about 16.5% of total of India's GDP. So that means one singular location does exceptionally well. Then of course there is Gujarat, which is one of the most industrialized states in the country. So you have huge levels of differences within the country context itself. In fact, if you talk about India's growth, I'd say that India is growing at about 8%, but we have to understand that there is part of India which is growing at a rate which is faster than 8%. There are something like at least 10 states which are growing at a rate which is greater than 10%. But there are, of course, states which are growing at a slower rate than this. In fact, the whole per capita income thing, in fact, if you start looking at markets as well, we will have to look at it from a perspective of states. You have a state like Bihar or UP, which has low per capita income of close to about 16,000 rupees, roughly about, say, $400 to $500. But now there is an extreme, which is a state like Delhi or a state of Goa, which is going to have per capita income which is greater than, say, $3,000. So there is a whole huge difference within the country. So we need to look at this whole huge reality as well. In fact, how do we think that we can actually learn from the vast country? There is a whole huge learning that could actually happen. In fact, as His Excellency was saying, that there are critically 3 or 4 things that we have to look at from the vast country. In fact, one is about tourism. I thought I should share some numbers about tourism with you. Basque Country alone got 2.4 million tourists in that place. And when you talk about India, India gets 6 million tourists in totality. So what is it that we could actually do to learn from you? So that is one thing that we have to look at. Of course, the second thing is going to be in, say, R&D investments. 2% of your total budget is in R&D. Are we really doing enough? If we really talk about innovation, what's the kind of innovation that we are actually doing? In fact, when we talk about innovation in the Indian context, I think there is a very huge celebration of an idea called Jugaad, which I feel is one of the biggest negatives in this country. For a simple reason, it's not about shortcuts. India has to be about what you call doing things right, and we could actually learn from you. The next thing that is about, say, smart grids, the solutions for India are going to be unique and how we could actually take them forward. So when you talk about India, I think within the realm of problems that we talk about are the biggest set of opportunities that actually reside here. In fact, if somebody has not come to India till date, then you have actually missed the boat. Or you've actually been a little too late. I think you still should come here. There is a whole huge opportunity that is going to unfold. India is not a country which has happened today. India is a country which is going to happen in the next 20 years. It's a reality which is going to unfold in the next 20 years. But be here for a longer duration. You cannot actually say that I'm going to be successful in, say, something like 6 months. You have to be here, you have to have the staying power and do it. And of course, as Rohit actually said, we are there to actually help, and of course with Basque Institute for Competitiveness for doing something unique and moving ahead. So these were a few remarks in terms of what I really wanted to say, in terms of, say, how demand conditions are changing, how productivity is going to change, how basic labor is available here, and things. So thank you.
I think, Amit, you painted a very, very heartening picture. And I think the fact remains that you've been pretty honest. And how did you do that? Because in the crisis, you pointed out to some interesting opportunities. And I'd be the last person who'd like to be in a kiosk on the roadside getting myself treated. But if that's going to be a reality, well, somebody should be doing it. So without much ado, I turn very quickly to the last speaker for the first session that we are undergoing right now. Mr. Amit Kumar, who is a cluster expert and in the GIZ SIDBI umbrella program. if you could step in and be, of course, mindful of the fact that the next session has already been pushed back a little, and we have a moderator who is a very busy editor who no doubt has to put a newspaper to bed. So, Amit.
Thank you, Rohit. And Amit had given me 10 minutes. Can we have the slides? So I'll try to be... Amit, I think already you made my job a little easy and difficult also. You're talking about the topic which clusters and India. India, states of country of countries, and when you're talking about the clusters in India, it's really a difficult topic to cover. But I'll try to bring all my experience of last 15 years in the 10 minutes, and let's see how successful I am. Next slide, please. This is just a typical, I think I was hearing the reference of Mr. Michael Porter. That's what cluster is. It's more of an academic reference that's many of us would be knowing, and for some who is not really into the concept, it's basically what we are talking of geographical concentration, where the company not only compete but also collaborate simultaneously. So it's all about that kind of thing. But if you try to look a little closely, then clusters are much more than geographical concentrations. And for successful clusters to really happen, it all depends on the holistic or a comprehensive policy kind of thing. So you need the right kind of network in terms of R&D, in terms of the macroeconomic policy, in terms of the inputs or the support programs. So this is more from a reference point of view. And if you just look into the India, and I will come to India case a little later, that's what exactly happening in India, but this is just some of the references or some of the experience when you look more closely in India, not only across all over the world. That's even within India, though we say that cluster approach is something like you adopt for the development of micro, small and medium enterprises, but each clusters are unique in itself, despite having all the parameters what you described. And when you look closely, that's okay. Which are the clusters which are doing goods? Then definitely it all depends on a complete functioning system, which I was talking in my last slides. And one of the things, one of the learnings from India and from even from European countries, which from where I work currently, is basically that you cannot really make a clusters happen, drawing the policies and things in a boardroom kind of things. All those clusters which are successful, basically, which are the bottom-up kind of process, where the stakeholders who are there, associations, the industries, and all those who really own the process, those are the clusters are really successful. Just a case and example in India would be all those, like you talk about Tirupur, you talk about Ludhiana, you talk about Jaipur, all those places, the clusters which are really successful are those where the process is driven by the bottom up. And specifically in case of India, and that basically a next extension of the bottom-up process, the role of business member organizations or the business associations are really very critical in bridging the gap between the supply side from the governments, what government is offering, and what the demands from the industry. And this successful associations are a critical cog in the wheel for successful clusters, specifically in India. What we are talking about, Amit was giving lots of examples how India is interesting, what are the opportunities, and when you talk into the cluster, this is some estimation, that's what kind of numbers we are talking of clusters in India. More than 6,000. 6,000 sounds a little bit too large a number. And if you further try to segregate that, this 6,000 consists of all those clusters which are also artisan-based clusters. So when you look into the clusters profile in India, it could be as small, let's say a kind of as traditional as something like leather clusters typically, or as high-tech as something aerospace clusters also. And I'm talking all in terms of small and medium enterprises, not the large companies, forget about that one. So the range of clusters or the profile of clusters in India varies from extreme or level intensive to a specifically high-tech. So you have got in the high-tech, new technology kind of things, lots of pharma, aerospace, biotech, IT, which are basically a new modern clusters kind of things. And when we look into the traditional kind of things, the handloom, the handicraft, the coir making kind of things, the khadi, traditional spinning and those kind of things. So it's a huge kind of gamut of products and services which are being made in India in different clusters. And out of this 6,000, most of them, please go back to the last one. Out of this 6,000, most of them basically are mainly into the micro enterprise cluster, which is basically the traditional artisan-based kind of things. And industrial clusters is basically where, what basically you describe as an industrial clusters are mainly those where the companies are a little bit organized, they work from a factory premises and all those kind of things, have some basic structures and things. And what's really happening in India when you're talking about clusters and what the government is trying to do is basically, and that's basically brings the experience that's in India for the last, I would say roughly around, I started 15 years back, so something 18 or 20 years is the kind of real focus of this whole cluster approach which is happening in India. That's okay, if you want to do for the enterprise promotion and enterprise growth, then cluster is the best bet. And currently from the central government, that's the government of India level, almost more than 14 or 15 ministries have got different kind of support programs for these clusters, depending upon varying from their sectoral profile, like Ministry of Textiles would have something for textiles, and going something more broad-based kind of Ministry of Commerce and Industry or Ministry of MSME, which is cross-cutting kind of thing. So almost 14-15 ministries at the central level supporting cluster approach kind of thing for the development of enterprises or private sector development. And at the level 2, many of the state level also have these cluster-based programs. What it really leads to is basically, though that's the strategy